In early April 2025, US President Donald Trump unexpectedly reversed his trade policy by announcing a 90-day pause on new tariffs for most countries, while simultaneously raising tariffs on Chinese imports to an unprecedented 125%.
Somebody had to do what we did, and I did a 90-day pause for the people that didn't retaliate, and that's what I did with China, because they did retaliate.
This stark differentiation sent shockwaves through global markets and international relations. While allies such as the European Union and the United Kingdom welcomed the pause, China was targeted with an economic barrage. Within hours, Beijing retaliated by slapping 84% duties on a broad range of American goods and placing 18 US firms on trade restriction lists. The financial markets, which had been spiraling days earlier due to fears of global protectionism, rebounded sharply in response to the partial pause. The S&P 500 soared by 9.5%, the Dow Jones by 7.9%, and Asian markets experienced record gains. Despite this optimism among US allies, the tariff escalation between the world's two largest economies, America and China, marks the opening of a new and dangerous chapter. Chinese officials openly accused Washington of attempting to destroy the international economic order for hegemonic purposes.
中国人不惹事，也不怕事。施压、威胁和讹诈不是同中方打交道的正确方式。中方必将采取必要措施，坚决维护自身正当合法权益。
Beijing's response was twofold: retaliate economically and rally national sentiment. While China's Ministry of Commerce suggested it was open to negotiations, its foreign ministry adopted a defiant tone, stating clearly that the US strategy will end in failure. The Chinese Communist Party views the US pressure campaign as an existential threat to its sovereignty and rise. So, why is this all dangerous? When major powers start decoupling economically, the risks don't stop at financial fallout. They move into the geopolitical and military domains, especially when both sides begin treating trade not as commerce, but as strategy. Before World War II, the US used economic pressure, not military force, to deter Japan's imperial ambitions, freezing assets, cutting off oil and steel. But that pressure didn't produce surrender. It produced Pearl Harbor. When a rising power perceives economic containment as an existential threat, war becomes not unthinkable, but logical within its strategic calculus. Today, US-China economic interdependence is collapsing. Tariff rates are at historic highs. Mutual trust has evaporated. Trade is no longer just trade, it's national security policy. That's why this moment is dangerous. Not because tariffs alone cause wars, but because the collapse of economic ties removes the stabilizing incentives that used to prevent them. When you strip away the cost of conflict, you make conflict more likely. This trade war has evolved into something broader, something systemic. It's no longer about unfair subsidies or intellectual property. It's about control over strategic technologies, access to critical resources, and regional dominance. And the pressure points are clear. Here are potential hypotheticals: semiconductors. The US has already moved to cut off China from advanced chip manufacturing, working with allies like the Netherlands and Japan to restrict access to EUV and DUV lithography. China, in response, is accelerating self-reliance and may seek leverage over TSMC and Taiwan, a move that would immediately draw in US military attention under current Indo-Pacific Command doctrines. 2. Rare earths and materials. Beijing has already threatened and trialled export controls on gallium, germanium, and graphite, essential to Western EVs, telecoms, and defense systems. A full cutoff, especially now under direct tariff retaliation, would force the US to invoke the Defense Production Act or secure emergency supplies via military allies, escalating dependency and coordination within defense alliances. 3. South China Sea logistics. The US and China already operate military assets in close proximity in this region. With trade routes now entangled in broader strategic rivalry, A situation where the US enforces sanctions or tariffs by interdicting shipments, real or suspected, could lead to conflict under the guise of customs enforcement or freedom of navigation operations. 4. Cyber and financial retaliation. As China faces tariff pressure, it may retaliate not just through trade, but via cyber attacks on US logistics systems or pressure campaigns on the offshore dollar clearing systems that finance US firms operating in Asia. In return, the US could escalate sanctions against Chinese banks supporting export-heavy state firms, pushing both economies into full-scale decoupling. US allies are aware. Japan, South Korea, the EU, and ASEAN partners are increasingly being asked to choose sides, economically and militarily. The 90-day tariff pause extended by Trump to most nations, excluding China, was welcomed, but analysts in Berlin, London, and Seoul are already warning this is the calm before the next wave. The Council on Foreign Relations and the Brookings Institution have both highlighted that economic decoupling accelerates military rivalry by removing the costs of escalation. China's 84% tariff retaliation, paired with nationalist rhetoric about resisting American economic warfare, suggests it now sees this as a long-term strategic conflict, not a temporary dispute.